Mad Max is back. Let's talk about Max Klesmit coming back to this Badgers basketball team. Plus, spring football rosters are out. We are almost there. Let's talk about the biggest surprises and gains on the football side. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Harings. Appreciate the heck out of everybody tuning in. Today's episode brought to you by Nissan, the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in the episode. Today's show, we are talking about Max Klesmit coming back to the basketball team, how big of a deal that is, and then it's all spring football roster, the transfers, the freshmen, big gains from last year's team. But Justin, I think we got to just start here because this kind of just popped today. Basketball Instagram put out a comment. It's glad to have you back with a picture of Max Klesmit out there working out. Something's going to be good for the Big Ten tournament. Huge deal for this team.
Yeah, I think you have to have him back for the Big Ten tournament if you expect him to be any type of factor in the NCAA tournament. Like, you can't have him coming back without getting his endurance back up prior to that. Like, the NCAA tournament is not the place you want to be trying to get your lungs back. And maybe you get a game or two out of this where he can kind of get his wind back and then you're ready to go for the NCAA. I don't think it'll take much longer than that, but you want him to be able to give you 20-plus minutes if you have to. And I think that this team needs that out of him in order to function at their highest level. But this is a huge, huge deal to them because I think he's their fire and I think he's their passion. Every team has that guy that's kind of the one to get on everyone's case when it seems like the intensity's slipping. That guy is Max. He's the guy that brings the energy to this team. And I just don't think there's another guy that plays that way with that kind of fire. Before him, it was Brad Davison. So, I mean, every team needs that guy that kind of gets everyone else kind of, pumped up. And I don't think there is really anybody else that you look at on this roster that does that.
Yeah, especially – I think it's a good point. I think your point about getting him back for the tournament's huge because now you can work him into it a little bit in games that, quite frankly, aren't the biggest deal in the world. He can get some reps. I just think, man, getting him back makes it so much easier on Blackwell and Tanje because they don't have to handle the ball as much, and it's going to help their legs. I think they wanted to play as many minutes. Blackwell's been playing 35 to 37 minutes a game. Like, that doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Down around 32.
Which is where he was when Klesmit was healthy. Yeah, so you and I agree. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this because more basketball content coming up this week, but they did just announce it today, so it's a big deal. Max Klesmit coming back. Because I got to be honest, I'll finish on this. I was starting to get worried that maybe this was something more serious and they were just playing coy with it.
Yeah, I think Rajiv kept mentioning that they said that he would have played against Penn State if necessary. I think they kind of viewed that game as like, this really doesn't matter, but I don't like that attitude. Like, you have things that are on the line. Like, when you're potentially dropping a seed line, anytime that you're doing that, I don't want to be doing that. Like, I think if you have potential to stay on the 3, I want to stay on the 3 line because then I'm facing the 2 seed as the top team on my side. I don't want to have to play the 1. I don't know about you, but there's a substantial difference normally between a 1 and a 2. Like,
huge difference.
The degree of quality of that team is pretty big.
Especially this year. You look at the Auburn, Alabamas, you don't want anything
Absolutely.
to do with it. And I agree with you. Like, I'll tell you this, that whole team played like they didn't really care about that game. It wasn't just like, oh, we don't know if we need Max because it's not a big of a deal. The whole team played like that wasn't a big deal. But let's not get too sidetracked on that because we have football to talk about, and we all kind of released some venom on that Penn State game. Spring football roster came out. I just kind of want to start here with the transfer. No, let me start here with some big takeaways. Rob Booker is no longer on the team. Rob Booker II. I think that's kind of been known, but that's official. Thomas Heiberger moving to inside linebacker. Jackson Aker moving to tight end, or to linebacker, I should say, for Heiberger. Let's start here with the transfer class. What stood out to you with the transfer class when you start to see those weights and sizes come in?
Well, I mean, most of the guys that we saw, that we have now seen that their heights have been locked in. Weights have obviously been substantially different than what we expected coming in. I think that they had a really good offseason for the transfers, especially in terms of putting on productive weight. We are talking in the Discord about this, and my only concern was, for me at least, is I like seeing the additional weight on. I don't want it at the expense of too much burst, because I think there's a kind of a tipping point there where you get stronger, but you don't necessarily keep the quickness that you want these guys to have. And that can be a problem, because we had two areas that we stunk last year. We weren't able to hold the point, and we weren't able to get home ever to get any disruption. So we need both of those things.
Yeah, I kind of think with the players you brought in, you're only getting, for the most part, one of those two things. You're getting hold the point, right? So the players you brought in, let's get better at that, and then hope a Nicholas Clayton or a Heiberger or an Allegro or one of those other, Sebastian Cheeks maybe, those guys maybe bring the burst. Like, I look at the portal class. You look at the guys that went out, and you and I have talked about this. We talked about in Discord on the show. Kurt Neal was 290 pounds last year. James Thompson Jr. is listed at 6'5", 295. Paez was like 305, something like that. You look at these guys here. Perkins is listed at 316. Peterson's 315. There is like real size on this front now that they did not have last year. And at least that gives me confidence they can at least hold the point.
Do you find it interesting? I'm looking at this roster list, and doesn't it seem like we're just listing our outside linebackers as our defensive ends as linebackers?
Yes.
Because everybody I look at on the defensive line, to me, it looks like an interior defensive lineman. Like, there's nobody that I look at there and say, this guy's going to play on the end. At best, you may play somebody at the 5 tech as a big defensive end in that role. But I kind of look at it like, and some people were getting uncomfortable with what was showing up on this. Listen, if it's splitting hairs, but if you really wanted to do it, put outside linebacker / defensive end. It will make you feel better about it. Michael Garner is not playing outside linebacker. They will never drop that guy unless it's a zone blitz. He will never drop into coverage ever this season. And he likely won't be in there on pass rush sets unless he turns out to be kind of an epiphany at the defensive end slot and starts blowing up tackles.
Which, if he is at 6'6", 300, you have a second round draft pick.
Oh yeah, if he shows that type of game where he's a 5-sack guy, you're looking at a guy who's potentially getting himself into draft caliber. But I think at worst, what he does is he's a guy who I think is going to be very capable of making a tackle uncomfortable, because they're not going to have a size advantage on him. He's going to be able to stalemate at worst against them.
And one of the things you're referencing, for people who don't have the roster in front of them, Michael Garner is listed as an outside linebacker. He's 6'6", 300 pounds. Corey Walker is listed as an outside linebacker. He's 6'5", 297. These are guys that are going to have the hand in the dirt. They're going to set the edge. They're going to, contain a tackle. They're going to hopefully these are the guys that hopefully create a 2nd and 9, a 3rd and 7. And then you bring in JVR. Suggs is interesting to me, right? He's listed at 299. That's a bursty player. If he's 299 with that burst that he showed at LSU, that's the guy you bring in on 3rd down, JVR Suggs, and you say, go get the passer. And that's where maybe that disruption comes in. He's the guy in this transfer class that I look at as Riger as well, but obviously he's going through a bit of an injury. He's a guy that I look at as maybe he's the guy who comes in and brings the disruption with this transfer group, hopefully.
Yeah, from the interior defensive lineman, I think him and Peterson are the two guys that I would look at that I think. And Peterson scares me a little bit. I think he's listed at, 316 now?
Yeah, 6'4", 316.
That number's getting a little high for my taste for a guy you want to be able to potentially – jump into the attacking the gaps and getting upfield. He had some of that at 305. That extra 11 pounds, I'm hoping, is good weight in that he gained a little burst. But it scares me potentially that maybe that might not be the case.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I'm so desperate just for a stout running defense that I'm almost like, give me all the big dudes. Like, I don't even care.
Part of me it will be shocked if they're even remotely in the class last year. I think they can be average this year, which, let's face it, would be a substantial jump. You get them in like around 60 for run defense, that's like a 30-place jump for this team. And that's not even great. That's 60. And if you can get disruption, if you can get anything, like if you can get top 80, think of how big of a jump that would be. And that's not even good. That's just like causing problems for the other team, because now you can potentially cause a negative play here and there.
No, I agree, man. But the two work so hand in hand, right? You get disruption partially by putting the offense in uncomfortable spots, which you do by clogging up 1st and 2nd down. Like, I know that's super simplistic and everybody listening to the show knows that, but it's worth repeating. You got to stop the run to set up the pass rush, because otherwise you're always in 3rd and 3. And then what do you do in 3rd and 3? You put guys like Walker and Garner out there because you have to stop the run on 3rd and 3. So then you don't have your pass rushers. So they work so hand in hand that I hope one leads to the other this year. We have to take a quick break. We're going to go back. Other transfer guys that stood out to Justin, plus this freshman class, a couple really interesting names, including Nicholas Clayton, up to a weight that I think it might be playable. We're going to talk about it next on Locked On Badgers. First, a quick break for our friends of the show over at Nissan. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On college basketball experts, which are the best in the business, are picking one team that stands apart. From top-seeded stars to unexpected upsets, these guys showcase the strength and sheer power to push their team forward. This week's Armada Team of the Week is the Duke Blue Devils. John Shire's team, led by National Player of the Year candidate Cooper Flagg, just ripped through the ACC, going 19-1. The Blue Devils were plus 434 points in ACC games, the largest point differential by a Power Conference league in our Power Conference team in league play since Kentucky in 1953-54. Insane. It's clear that our Team of the Week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of our Nissan outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder. Go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Okay, let's talk. Anybody else in the portal transfer class height and weight that caught your eye? I'm going to give you one that Tanner Posio coming in at 6'6".
Yeah, I was going to say, are you concerned at all with him going up 20 pounds?
Not at all. No. Here's why. Speed wasn't really his predominant factor of his game. He's more of a possession guy. He boxes people out. And I kind of wonder if the extra weight, because I don't think they're going to put bad weight on him. He's an upperclassman. He knows how his body works. He's a veteran. I kind of think if that extra weight is going to help him become more of an all-rounded tight end, because his blocking in the MAC at I'm blanking on where he came from in the MAC. Ball State, thank you. It wasn't his forte. Maybe now he's an even more well-rounded player, and the hands aren't going anywhere. So that one doesn't bother me. I have a player on the tight end room that does bother me a little bit. We'll get into, but no, I'm good with Cozio.
No worries there. I think that for me, it's 20 pounds. It's more shocking to me with how much weight it is in such a short period of time that I worry about how will his body react to the extra weight. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good weight given his height, because he's a guy that, he's 6'7". 257 is nothing for a guy that's that big. So I don't really have an issue with it. And you're right, we weren't looking at a guy who was like a 4'6" guy. He's more like a 4'7" type guy who was a route runner. He's fluid. He's a guy who can create some separation, but he's not a guy that's going to probably attack the seam as much and just blow by people and get you that 30-yard grab up the seam.
Also a guy that's going to get hit in the Big Ten coming across the middle. Another 15, 20 pounds is not going to hurt him playing the schedule we have to play this year coming from where he played. Anybody else in the portal class stand out to you before we move on to some of the freshmen?
Not really. Actually, I was going to say the freshmen, there's quite a few of them that are interesting to me.
Well, let's get into it. I'll let you start if there's somebody that's interesting to you, and we'll go back and forth with this freshman class coming in.
You already brought him up. It's Nicholas Clayton.
Yeah.
Listen, will be shocked if this guy doesn't play, and that's me saying I believe that he should. It does not mean that he will. I think he, as a true freshman already, would have more sacks than anybody had last year if he played. I just think when you look at his physical tools, he is a guy who can have a Nick Herbig type impact off the edge as a true freshman. That doesn't mean that he's going to be perfect on that spot. He's going to be a guy that you have to be very careful with situations, because he's going to see some things that are probably going to get him in bad spots. But if you can turn him loose in the pass rush, he's going to give fits to a tackle. He's just too quick, and he's so twitchy in terms of how he reacts to guys. We saw it how many times where he'd take that jab step to the outside and then cut back inside, and tackles were just giving him the gap. They couldn't react to him quickly enough. That's going to play still at that Big Ten level.
Yeah, I agree. You and I are both high on him. You were high on him really early. 223 plays as a speed edge pass rusher. What was Herbie?
230 by the time season hits.
Yeah, what was
him for his nutrition up until summer?
Yeah, what was Herbig when he came in as a freshman? 230?
I believe he came in at like 219, and I think he started the season at like 227.
Yeah, he was right in that range. Like, He's got the entire summer. He's still got fall. The fact that he came in at like 197 and he's already up to 223 speaks really well to his work ethic, the work this strength and conditioning department's doing. He's going to play this year. Like, I'd be stunned if he didn't. Now, there was a couple guys last year I said that about too, that I thought should have played, and I'm still kind of stunned they didn't. So we'll see. But they need burst on the edge. There's not a lot of guys like him on the roster. And if he's 225 on passing downs, again, you're not asking him to take on a pulling tackle on 2nd and 4.
He'll get annihilated on that.
Yeah. Welcome to the Big Ten moment there. But you're asking him on 3rd and 7 to bend the edge. He can absolutely do that. So I agree. That's the first one I went to as well. Let me hit on the other one I found really interesting to look at was the freshman offensive lineman. One of the things we both talked about was the size of guys that they're recruiting at the offensive line spot. You don't need to project as much, right? It's hard to project a 240-pound, 6'7" offensive lineman. Hardy Watts, 6'5", 295. Michael Roski, 6'8", 308. Bro, that dude in 2 years, Roski, is going to be 6'8", 325. Davenport, 6'6", 293. Great size for the freshman offensive lineman.
So I have to look at this. I'm looking at the same thing as you, and I just want to throw this out there. Is this a typo looking at the offensive lineman room? Peyton Lang at 372 pounds?
He is huge. That's probably not a typo.
Wow. That's a big deal. But yes, looking at this for perspective, people, in the offensive line room, we have 3 guys that are not 300 pounds. And they are all 290 plus. Mm-hmm. That tells you what Wisconsin is getting into that room. My rule of thumb on a true freshman offensive lineman is if he's ahead of the curve, they're typically around 290. And by the next year, they'll probably be around 310. So I think that they're showing roughly where you want them to be as true freshman guys. They all seem to be in that kind of ballpark of being ahead of the curve. And I think we're going to see a lot of these guys in the 2 deep next year as guys who are going to fill out. And I think we're going to have a really, really deep offensive line room next year.
Yeah, there's some pieces leaving, so they're going to have to step up. But we both like both the young, the last 2 groups that they've landed at the offensive line room. Stay with the offensive line. A couple of returning guys that caught my eye. The first one is, I think maybe one thing that we missed on that we haven't talked about a lot is Renfro basically lost a couple years of development with injury. He's up to 311 now, or what? 313. Bigger. 313. He put on 11 pounds. That's what it is. He's up to 313. He put on 11 pounds. Maybe this year we get the version of Renfro that we were kind of expecting finally, now that he's been healthy for a little while and he's been able to train an entire offseason in a healthy state. That's a good way for him in the pivot.
I agree. And I think we have some options now towards guards. You and I were talking about Emerson Mandel coming in. He's a guy that's up. I think he's up 8. Was he 310 up to 318? And that, to me, it's probably close to the ceiling where you want him at. I think he can carry that way well because he's such an athletic guy. But they've got some maulers. This offensive line is going to be a big offensive line. And the amusing thing about it is it's not really a team, guys that are going to struggle with athleticism. Like, you have some big bodies that are guys that are 320 plus. Like, Haywood is a guy who can conceivably carry 320 plus and still be a good athlete at that size. You have, like I said, Mandel is a guy who can be at 318 and be just a monster at guard at that size. And then you like to see a guy like who I think struggled a little bit with strength at times in Renfro, getting up that 10 pounds. If that's good weight for him, that could really help him anchor on the interior.
Yeah, I think that was an issue for him last year. I think he got pushed around a little bit in the middle of that line. So a little stronger there. Great point on Mandel. Haywood is 6'8", 325. Kid's a monster. Another one I really like is Corey getting over 300. Ryan Corey's a guy with good movement skills. Him getting to, I think he's at 305, 304 right now, 308. Like, with his movement skills, not this year, but next year, Corey could be one of your guys on the interior that plays a lot. So a lot to like there. Also on the offensive line, I want to hit you with my guy on the offensive side before we move on that I don't really love the weight.
Sure.
I don't know if you'd agree. Maybe you disagree with me on this. We actually haven't talked about this. Jackson McGowan, 223 pounds, 226 pounds. I feel like
I think he's struggling, man. I wonder if he's a guy that just can't put the weight on.
Like, we kind of comped into a Kendricks type, right? That type of tight end.
Kendricks was
40. Yeah. You're not a good enough athlete at 226.
Yeah, no, he's not. I look at him. He is the Isaiah Green May guy where they just really struggle to put weight on. He seems to be that guy. Like he keeps getting stuck in the 220s, and you're like, we need you at 240. Like if you're going to play tight end, period, you need to be at least 235, and you're 10 pounds shy of that. Like effectively, all he can really be used is a guy who plays out in space that maybe you crack block down off the edge and set some things up in the run game, but you don't want him going head to head with a defensive end. He's too light. He's going to get thrown around.
And he's not really any bigger than Chris Brooks at this point, to be honest. Chris Brooks is 222, 223.
Yeah, if there's a guy that I feel more confident in being dynamic at that size, it's Brooks. I
agree. Yeah, same thought here. We're going to take one more quick break, talk about a few more freshmen that caught our eye and a few other returning players that caught our eye. It is always great to get football back. So that is what we're talking about here. Quick break for friends of the show over at today's episode over at Roy, which is an incredible new way to support NIL. Listen, there's a lot of questions with NIL. Roy helps solve a lot of those issues. The future of college sports is here. It's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happen on the table. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. Now with Roy, you get to be part of the change and support Wisconsin Badgers athletes in the most transparent way possible. Roy allows you to choose a player you want to support, get exclusive content and kind of items or contributions from those athletes that you get back part of this, how you decide how much you want to contribute, and you can help maintain the roster and the players you like. Think of it almost like a tip. That's what Roy is here for. The best part, if your player transfers, you also get your money back. It's a risk-free way to show your support. The Roy app is giving fans control. No more uncertainty. Download the Roy app today from App Store. Start backing Wisconsin Badgers athletes the way they deserve with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. All right, let's come back into this. Any other freshmen that caught your eye? A couple on my list. Xavier Bonu, 6'2", 305. I don't know if he's going to play this year. You had a good point on this. There's a lot of big bodies in that front seven. They brought a lot of guys in. But I love this dude coming in at 305.
Yeah, I think what we are seeing is a guy who will probably be will have the body ready for next year, even if he doesn't play this year. I'm hoping they get 4 games out of him. I think it probably is in this team's best interest to not need him, especially, I mean, Dylan Jones is the big one. You and I were talking about, or not Dylan Jones, Dylan Johnson. Yep. Him being 312, low-key might be the biggest deal in the offseason for this defensive line. I don't know how you were feeling about him. I expected him to be like 295. Him coming in at 312 is a really productive weight for him, because he is a guy that we do know has the athleticism to be able to probably move at that weight and the level of strength that you want. That if he can actually hold at that weight, he's gonna beat up some offensive linemen, because he's gonna be more athletic than pretty much every guy across from him.
That's a really good one. And you're talking about a kid who wasn't able to enroll early last year, has a wrestling background in high school. So this is really one of the first times he's been able to fully dive into, let's get the body right for football. And wow, you're right. Like with his ability to play with leverage, his ability to play with hands, his ability to play with balance at that size, with some of the bursts that we saw in his senior high school film, and some of what we saw last year from him playing as a true freshman. Yeah, that's a great point. Probably one that isn't being talked about enough.
And I think because of that weight, he just won't wear down like you'd expect him to. I think that was the biggest deal that people don't understand last year. The defensive line really wasn't terrible at the beginning of games. That weight differential wore on them as games went on. And a lot of it was you're facing offensive linemen that are 310, 320, and everyone on your defensive line is like 290. And that is a substantial difference. Well, now you basically, everyone on our defensive line is roughly the same size as the guy standing across from him.
And you have more of them.
Yep. Yeah. And you have numerous other guys that are kind of in a good position weight-wise to be able to stay with. I mean, right now we have in the defensive line room, there are 7 guys who are 300 plus. And that's just the DL group. You also have like we were talking about on that outside linebacker room, where you have one guy that's 297 and one guy that's 300 there. So we went from a room that had do we have anybody besides who was the defensive lineman last year? Jamel Howard was the only guy that really was 300 plus, right? Was there anybody besides him that was 300 plus?
I mean, Brendan Lane was 300 plus. He was just over 300, but he didn't play.
Yeah, he was like 303 or something like that.
Yes, he put on some extra weight this offseason too. So Brendan Lane's bigger. Jamel Howard at 313. Let me ask you about this one. This one's interesting to me. Ernest Willer down to 245, listed as an outside linebacker. I am getting vibes, not the same type of player. I'm getting Arrington Farrar vibes, though, of like, we don't really know how to use this guy. And
I'm not disagreeing with you one bit at all there. I'm a little uncomfortable with him. And the reason being is that when I watched film on him, I don't see a guy who is super fluid and doesn't bend well and really isn't really super explosive. He was more of a defensive end guy to me. And I know he's listed as an outside linebacker, and you're probably looking at him similar to what you're doing with Peterson. But if you give me the option to play him or a guy like Clayton, I want to play Clayton every single time because I know that translates. That speed is going to be a problem. I'm not sure the level of speed and athleticism that Willer has is like, I don't think, do you think he's a better athlete than Bowler was? I don't. Bowler had some really good fit. Like, I still don't understand how athletically he didn't translate.
I think it was a bit of a, I don't know. I don't want to go into, I think, yeah. So I thought Willer would eventually be a 265, 270 pound end.
Yeah.
That would be
that's how I thought too. Like maybe use the 5-tech.
Him as an outside linebacker, I don't know how it works unless you're just saying he's going to be
standing up. I just don't.
I wonder if he's going to be an Aaron Witt, Errol Peterson type, or we're going to use you to set the edge, and then pass rushers are going to come in after that. And it would be a bummer if that's the case because he had more upside we thought coming in. Now, I'd also point out, 2 years into his college career, there's time for this to develop and go a couple different ways.
Absolutely. It's problematic looking at that. It seems like they keep bouncing him around because they're not quite sure what to do with him. You see his weight go way up. You see his weight go way back down. And now it's like, well, where are we going? Because what I can say is, like, we have Williams coming in. That's a dude that I expect to be around 280, 275, and being able to play and be disruptive at that size. And I almost think that you can get – they told him he might be standing up, and I don't love that with him either. I think he's better laterally than Willer is. He's a more fluid athlete. I just think that he's a guy I want. Like I get really concerned with guys of that size and pad level when you put him in a stand-up position off the snap because he's a legit 6'6".
Yeah.
And unless you're a freak athlete like a TJ Watt or something like that you're 6'5" plus, and you can really bend, there's not many guys that can come in and stay low and really cut the corner.
No, Van Ginkel was that type of guy. Those guys are rare, though.
That's a very different build. Although Williams did come down to his credit. Like, his senior film was very different than what his junior film was.
Yeah, and we'll see where he, like, as a freshman who's not even enrolling early, we'll see how that one kind of goes. But, yeah, I'm right there with you on Willer. I don't know. Hopefully it works out. I'm not fully sure about the different positions.
I would love nothing more. And people, like, I know people kind of get down on us at times when we are critical of guys. We'd love nothing more to see Willer to blow up. Like, any of these guys. We're being critical because when you look at it, there's some smoke or warning signs there where you're kind of like, what I'm seeing here, I've seen in the past at times. And you're like, I'm hoping that's not the case. Yep. It doesn't mean that he's not busting his butt to be the best that he can be either. That's the other part of it, is these guys just sometimes aren't a perfect fit for the college game. Like they're man amongst boys in high school. And once everyone catches up, it gets harder to be able to kind of exploit your physical gifts.
Well, it also feels like, and you're totally right, like we root for everybody. Like nothing makes us happier than the Badgers being good. So we want everybody to succeed.
We've been waiting a while for that.
Yeah, if Willer becomes Lawrence Taylor, nobody will be happier than us. I promise you that. But there's also an element of it feels like this staff is trying to figure it out a little bit on the fly too, trying to move some pieces around, kind of change what they're doing. So I think there's some flux here that still has to get shaken out is my bigger point. Like we're going to see what happens in spring and fall. I do quickly want to hit on a couple DBs that caught my eye, a couple freshmen. I think Cairo Skane's coming in at 6'2", which is great to see that listed height kind of match up with what we thought. Good size. I think he could play early as kind of a high floor corner. And then both the safeties, 6'1", 195, Emmerich and Dean, the way they can move.
So who's number 24 at the cornerback room, Ryan?
Jameer Scott.
What position is he? I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
I don't know on Scott. Like, we talked about it. I like Scott. Listen, I like Scott. I think he's more of a hybrid.
We've been back and forth on him about what his best position is.
I know we've talked to people on staff too. Have been kind of like, we've gotten some mixed signals on Scott, just in terms of where.
You want me to be blunt on him? What I think it is. I think that corner room is very thin, and they view him as a guy who has versatility.
Well, I would agree. Versatility is definitely part of his game. And going back to the point we just made, nothing would make me happier than if he becomes a great corner. I do like Skanes. I think Skanes, I just like, because I think he's a little underrated. I think he's got a little more juice than the recruiting rankings kind of give him. And then, like I said, both the freshman safeties coming in at 6'1", 195, the way they can move. Yeah, that's a really good thing for those two. I was
expecting them to be more in like the 180, 185. They clearly put on some good weight during training.
Mm-hmm. That's a good sign. Any last thoughts here, Justin? Like, I kind of finished up on my DBs that I was interested in. Any last thoughts that you had looking at this roster? Anything else with football on the horizon?
What do you make Darian Dupree being 7 pounds heavier than Dylan Jones?
Listen, I think he's the type of guy. You know what I think with Dupree? I've been thinking about this a lot. And I think he's the type of guy who is just massively in the lower body. Like, he's just a stronger guy than you think.
Didn't why can't I think? Brady say that he thought that he would probably be the guy out of the running backs that would win for lower body strength. Mm-hmm. That doesn't shock me. We talked about his balance when we originally got him as being like, that's one of his gifts. Like, there are very few running backs that we've seen that can absorb contact on the lower body and maintain balance. And part of the reason he can keep that balance is he is so strong through his legs and down through the ankles that he can maintain that balance. That's not something that a lot of guys have.
He's the type of guy who, like, his lower body drive and strength is, I think, better than people give him credit for, which is where some of I think that weight gain comes from. He could be in line for a really good year, by the way. It feels like people are down on Jones and Dupree a little bit because they had very high expectations coming in. I feel like those guys could both just kind of have really, really good sophomore seasons here for the Badgers, especially with this new offensive scheme they put in.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. If you go back, there's really not many years that you have a bad running attack under Grimes. There was the one year at Baylor. Every back last year that got meaningful carries for Kansas was 5.8 or higher. That tells you how good this scheme works for running the football. Now, they've been pretty good at running the football even prior to Grimes, and they have an NFL back. Like, Devin Neal is going to be going to the NFL, and is probably going to be a guy I would say is going to be like a 4th or 5th round pick, I'm going to guess. Super productive for them. But I don't think he tested out of this world. I think he was like a 4.6 guy and ended up having well over 1,000 yards last year. I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see this team run for 2,500 yards or whatever, and we're going to be looking at it like, wow, we got 3-4 guys that got 300 yards plus.
Yeah, and it'll feel more normal. The offense, that's something Curtis Holland has said a lot. It'll just feel a little more normal for Badger fans. All right, we're going to wrap it there. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. Appreciate Justin jumping on. Obviously, football coming up. Max Klesmit coming back. A bunch of content coming up on Wisconsin. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Big Ten. All the biggest stories from the conference on the Locked On Big Ten channel. Go check out the Bucker Report with Justin and Rajiv when they drop shows on Wisconsin. Thank you for tuning in, and we will talk later.